To my dear cousin Adoma, who finally came to visit us in Seoul. She is 38 years old, my friends, 38, and still nobody has put a ring on her finger.
At 38 years old, Adoma Frimpong stood in the middle of a ballroom in Seoul, holding a champagne glass that was trembling in her own hand, and listened to her cousin tell 200 strangers exactly why no man had ever wanted to marry her. The ballroom was the kind of room people described in whispers. Gold leaf on the ceiling, crystal chandeliers that caught the light and refused to let it go. A floor so polished it doubled the room. 200 guests in evening wear, all of them watching the woman in the burgundy dress at the center table, the way people watch a slow accident through a window they cannot open. Her cousin Afia stood at the microphone in champagne silk, smiling the way she had been rehearsing in the mirror for 3 weeks. She raised her glass. She said,
To my dear cousin Adoma, who finally came to visit us in Seoul. She is 38 years old, my friends, 38, and still nobody has put a ring on her finger.
There was a ripple of laughter. Afia waited for it. She let it settle in the room like perfume. Then she lifted the glass a little higher, and the smile on her face sharpened. She said, We thought, well, maybe Seoul will do for her what London could not. Maybe in a new country, in a new dress, she will finally learn what it takes to be wanted. The laughter rose. Adoma did not move. She did not lift her eyes from the white of the tablecloth. She did not set down her glass. She did not cry. She had been practicing not crying since she was 22 years old. What her cousin did not know, what no one in that entire ballroom knew except the man in the far corner who had not blinked once in the last 40 seconds, was that this was the very last sentence Afia Sarpong would ever say in a room she was the most important person in. The man in the corner was wearing a charcoal suit and a single silver cufflink that caught the light when he turned his wrist. He set his glass down on the side table. He did not set it down loudly. He did not need to. The waiter beside him stiffened. The guard at the door looked at the floor. A man 2 tables over, who had been laughing a moment ago, suddenly forgot how to laugh and remembered how to be very, very quiet. Park Min-jun stood up, and the room, which had not been told who he was, somehow understood that the woman at the microphone had 10 more seconds to keep speaking before the rest of her life began. If this is your first time here, welcome. This is Afro-Korean Love Stories Vault, the home of the love stories the world tried to silence and could not. If you have ever sat in a room and been made small by the very people who were supposed to love you, then this story was written for you. Hit the subscribe button so the next one finds you on the night you need it most. And now let me take you back. Back to the morning before that ballroom. Back to the phone call she should never have answered. Adoma was standing barefoot at her kitchen window in London the morning the call came, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold without her noticing. It was a Tuesday in early October. The sky over her road in Tottenham was the color of soft pewter. On the radio, a man was talking about a film she had not seen. On the counter beside her, 2 trays of pistachio financiers were cooling. She was 38 years old. She was not single because no one had ever wanted her. She was single because, 7 years ago, a man named Stephen had sent her a magazine cutout of a slim woman in white 3 weeks before their wedding, with a note attached that said he could not promise to be proud of her on their wedding day. She had read the note once. She had folded it twice. She had put it in a drawer. She had not opened the drawer since. The wedding dress was still in its bag at the back of her bedroom closet, still wrapped in the tissue paper from the day she bought it. She had not told anyone. Her family believed she was difficult. Her family believed she had been too picky, too quiet, too career-focused, too plus-sized, too tall, too proud. Her family had 1,000 explanations for her solitude. None of them were the right one. She had let them choose whichever explanation made them feel best about themselves. The phone rang. It was Afia. Adoma looked at the screen for 3 rings before she answered. Her cousin's voice on the line was honey. Sister, she said. Sister, you sound far away. Adoma did not say what she was thinking, which was that they had spent the last 6 years being far away. Afia said she had been thinking about her. Afia said she had been telling Kwame, only last week, that the family had been so unfair to her. Afia said she was throwing a small anniversary gala in Seoul next month. Nothing big, only 200 people, and that she wanted Adoma there. She said it the way you say the easiest thing in the world. She said, "Sister, come to Seoul. Let us spoil you. Let us make this right." Adoma did not answer immediately. There was something underneath her cousin's voice. A small steady pulse that did not match the warmth on top of it. The way Afia paused for breath felt practiced. The way she said the word sister felt like a key being turned in a lock. Adoma heard it. Adoma chose, in that small fraction of a second, not to hear it. Her grandmother in Ghana had called her 3 days earlier. Her grandmother, Mame Akua, in her blue and gold head wrap, on the family WhatsApp, had said only one thing. She had said, "Adoma, my child, the world will never reach for you. You have to walk into it on your own legs and let it find you there." Adoma had been thinking about that sentence for 3 days. So when Afia, 2 minutes into the call, said, "Sister, come," Adoma said, "All right." She said it before she had time to be afraid of saying it. She booked the flight that afternoon. Seoul in late October was sharp and gold and full of weather that could not decide what it wanted to be. Adoma landed at Incheon at 10 in the morning with one suitcase and the smallest amount of hope she had allowed herself to feel in 7 years. Afia was not at the airport. The driver who collected her wore a black suit and did not speak. He held a small printed sign with her name spelt wrong on it. He drove her into the city without looking at her in the mirror once. The car was quiet enough that Adoma could hear the leather of the seat under her every time she breathed. The hotel where Afia and Kwame lived was the kind of hotel that did not have a name on the front of it. The doors opened before the car had fully stopped. A woman in a cream uniform took Adoma's coat without quite making eye contact. The lobby smelled of cut orchids and money so old it had stopped smelling of money at all. Afia kissed both of Adoma's cheeks in the lift. She said, "Sister, you look tired." She said it like a diagnosis. Ya, the younger cousin, was waiting in the suite Afia had reserved for Adoma. Ya was wearing a dress that was almost the same as the one Afia was wearing, in a color that was almost the same, half a shade off. Ya filmed Adoma's reaction to the suite for her phone. Afia said, "The gala is on Saturday." She said it lightly. She said, "There is a man we want you to meet." She said that even more lightly. Ya, behind her sister, hid her smile behind her phone. Adoma, who had been hoping for one full afternoon before whatever this was started, set her suitcase down in the suite and felt the first soft tightening in her chest. The kind of tightening that has nothing to do with the body and everything to do with knowing, before you can prove it, that you have walked into something. 3 blocks from Adoma's suite, in a glass tower over the Han River, Park Min-joon sat at the head of a long black table in a long black room. There were 6 men in the room with him. There was a glass of water in front of him. There was a man named Tae-soo standing at the foot of the table who had been talking, for 7 minutes, about a delivery that had not arrived and was now being attributed to a misunderstanding. Min-joon listened without interrupting. When Tae-soo finished, Min-joon nodded once, slowly, the way a man nods at a story he already knows the ending of. He said, "Tae-soo, do you remember the rule?" Tae-soo said he did. Min-joon said, "Say it." Tae-soo said the rule out loud. He said it quietly. He said it the way a man says a prayer in a language he was raised in but has tried, for years, to forget. Min-joon picked up his phone. He pressed one name. He waited. When the voice on the other end answered, he said 3 words. He did not raise his voice. He said, "The warehouse now." Then he ended the call. He set the phone down beside the glass of water. He looked at Tae-soo. He said, "Go home to your wife." Tae-soo did not move. The 6 men around the table did not look at Tae-soo. Min-joon said again, evenly, "Go home to your wife. She is making the soup you like." Tae-soo went home. The clock on the wall of the long black room kept moving. The second hand circled the face once. Then again. Then again. 40 minutes outside the city, in a warehouse Tae-soo would never be arriving at that night. A different man was being told, in a flat, unhurried voice, that the rule had been broken. By the time Tae-soo's wife was lifting the lid off her pot of soup across the city and calling her husband to the table, that other man was no longer breathing. He had been the man Tae-soo was supposed to manage. He had been the man Tae-soo had been quietly skimming from for 3 months. Tae-soo was alive. Tae-soo would spend the rest of his life knowing that the only reason his hands were still attached to his arms was because Park Min-joon happened to like the way his wife made soup. That was the rule. That was the first thing anyone needed to understand about the man who would walk into the ballroom on Saturday night. By Saturday night, Adoma had walked through 3 days of Seoul knowing she had made a mistake. The dress arrived in her suite on Saturday afternoon. Afia had picked it out. It was burgundy silk, beautifully cut, but a full size smaller than Adoma's body. Afia laughed about the mistake. Ya filmed the laugh. Adoma stood very still in the center of the suite for a long minute, said nothing, then walked into the closet, pulled out the burgundy wrap dress she had brought from London, and put it on. She looked at herself in the mirror. She thought about her grandmother. She walked downstairs to the ballroom. The ballroom was the same room from the very first moment of this story. The 200 guests, the gold leaf ceiling, the chandeliers. Adoma was seated at the center table, beside an empty chair Afia had reserved for a man who never arrived. 3 minutes before Afia took the microphone, Park Min-joon walked into the back of that ballroom. He was there for Kwame. Kwame Sarpong was 4 months behind on a debt that had been borrowed from a man who had been borrowing from Min-joon. The gala was a flex. Min-joon had come to remind Kwame whose floor he was standing on. He did not expect what he saw. He saw a woman in a burgundy dress at the center table, holding her glass with both hands, not lifting her eyes, not crying. He saw a cousin at the microphone with a champagne glass held high. He listened for 40 seconds. 40 seconds was longer than he had stood still in a public room in 20 years. He set down his glass. Park Min-joon stood up. Around the perimeter of the ballroom, one waiter, one guard, and one nervous laughing businessman all came to the same quiet realization in the same fraction of the same second. The most feared man in Seoul was on his feet. The microphone in Afia's hand kept going for 2 more sentences. By the 3rd sentence, Afia had begun to feel the air change behind her, although she did not know why. By the 4th, Kwame had seen Min-joon and gone the color of the tablecloth. Min-joon walked across the ballroom. He did not hurry. He never hurried. He walked in the same unhurried rhythm he had walked everywhere for 28 years. He arrived at the center table. He pulled out the empty chair beside Adoma. He sat down. He looked at her, for 1 full second, and the entire architecture of his face shifted in a way that no one on earth had ever seen before, including the man whose right hand it would soon become to keep him alive. He turned to Afia. He said, into the silence the room had become, Mr. Sarpong, Mrs. Sarpong, finish the speech. We are all listening. Kwame could not finish the speech. Afia could not finish the speech. Adoma was the one who finally spoke. She turned her head, slowly, and looked at the man who had just sat down beside her, and she said quietly only to him, thank you. Min-joon nodded once. He said, your dress is beautiful. He said it like a fact. And Adoma, who had not been told her dress was beautiful in 7 years, did not yet know that the rest of her life had just begun. The gala emptied itself in 20 minutes. 200 guests with somewhere to be. Afia was found in the corridor with her hand pressed flat against the wall, breathing as if she had run a race. Ya stood 3 feet behind her and could not stop watching her sister's face. Kwame was on the phone in the lobby trying to reach a man who had stopped answering. Adoma went back to her suite alone. She sat on the edge of the bed. She did not cry. She picked up her phone, opened the family WhatsApp, and recorded a voice note to her grandmother. She said, Mame, I came to Seoul on my own legs. I am all right. She sent it. She put the phone face down. She did not, in the morning, fly home. She told herself it was because she had paid for a hotel room she had not yet used. She told herself it was because she was not going to let Afia decide what day she left this country. She told herself it was because she had spent her own money to come to Seoul, and she was going to see Seoul properly before she left. None of these reasons were the real one. The real one was sitting in the back of a black car at that exact moment, somewhere on the other side of the river, telling his right hand to find out everything there was to find out about a woman in a burgundy dress. Adoma checked out of Afia's hotel. She moved into a smaller, quieter hotel near the old palace. She left no forwarding address. She walked Seoul alone for 4 days. On the 2nd day, she met him in a bookshop near Insadong. He was looking at a book of poetry in English. She thought it was a coincidence. It was not. He did not say his name. He said, you are far from home. She said, so are you. He smiled, just barely, at the corner of his mouth. He left before she did. On the 3rd day, she met him at a small bakery she had found on her own. He was already at a table when she walked in. He stood up when she entered. He pulled out the chair across from him. He said, the orange cake here is good. They sat for an hour. They did not exchange numbers. He paid without asking. She did not let him pay the next time, 2 days later, when she met him at a tea house near the river and he was already at a table by the window, exactly the way she would have chosen for herself. On the 4th day it rained. She had been walking back to her hotel without an umbrella when the sky opened on her. She had ducked under the awning of a closed gallery. He was already there. How he had known she would be on that street, at that hour, in that rain, was a question she would carry with her for years and never ask out loud. It was enough that he had known. It was enough that he had been waiting. He did not say anything for a long minute. The rain came down hard enough that the world outside the awning became a wall of water. He took off his jacket. He set it over her shoulders. She started to give it back. He set his hand on the lapel and held it there. He said quietly, "Please." Neither of them touched. Neither of them moved. The rain kept falling. The city kept being a city. 2 strangers stood under an awning in Seoul. One of them was the most dangerous man in the country, and he had not been this still in 20 years. The other was a woman who had been told for 7 years that no one was going to want her. Her grandmother's voice, in her head very softly, said, "My child, I told you. The world will find you." She did not look up at him. She did not need to. She knew, in the way a woman knows, that he was looking at her. If you are still with me, if your hand is over your mouth right now, this is the part where I have to ask you to do something. Tap that subscribe button. Send this video to the friend who lives for the kind of love that walks into a room and changes the temperature. And if this story is doing something to you, type the words "I am enjoying it" in the comments right now. I want to know you are with her. Now sit back, because what happens next you are not ready for. Adoma was sitting alone in the small bakery near her hotel on the morning of the 5th day when her cousin found her. Afia did not sit down. She stood at the table, in a long beige coat she had not yet taken off, and looked down at Adoma the way you look at someone who has stolen something from you and does not yet know you have caught them. She said very quietly, "Do you know who he is?" Adoma did not pretend not to understand. She did not answer. Afia leaned down. She put both hands flat on the table. She said, "Sister, your generous Korean stranger. Your bookshop friend. Your gentleman with the jacket. Look up his name. Park Min-jun. Look him up. He is a criminal. He is the criminal. He is the reason my husband cannot sleep at night. He is the reason men in this city go home in pieces. The man who sat at your table at my gala is a butcher in a suit, and he has decided, for reasons I cannot begin to understand, that he wants you." Afia straightened. She smiled, suddenly, like a woman who had remembered her own face. She said, "Congratulations, sister. You finally found a man." She walked out. Adoma sat at the table for a long time. She opened her phone slowly. She typed his name into the search bar. The first article that loaded was a piece in a Korean business publication from 2 years ago. She read it. Then the next one. Then the next. She read for 1 hour without moving. Her tea went cold. Her hands did not. They stayed flat and steady on the surface of the table the entire time. When she finally stood up, every piece of the last week reassembled itself behind her eyes. The man in the bookshop who happened to be reading English poetry. The bakery he was already sitting in. The tea house she would have chosen. The awning in the rain. The jacket. The hand on the lapel. The please. She walked out of the bakery into the cold afternoon. He was waiting for her. In a black car. Across the street. She crossed the street. She got into the car. She said, "Tell me." He told her. He did not soften it. He did not perform shame. He did not ask her to forgive him. He told her in the back of the car, in the kind of voice he had not used out loud in 28 years, exactly what he was, exactly what he had done, exactly what he was capable of, and exactly the name of the man whose phone call 4 nights ago had ended a different man's life because of a misunderstanding that was not actually a misunderstanding. He told her something else. He told her that the man whose career he had ended on the night of Tae Soo's soup had been working for a rival named Choi Sang-hyuk. He told her that the rival had been planning to use her cousin Kwame's gala for a kidnapping. He told her that the name on the list, the name the rival had selected because she was Kwame's relative and an easy lever, was Adoma Frimpong. He told her that he had saved her 4 days before they had ever spoken. Adoma looked at him for a long time. She said quietly, "Get out of the car with me." He got out. They stood on the pavement in front of a row of old plane trees in their autumn colors. She said, "I am 38 years old. I have been alone for 7 years. I have been called too much by men with smaller hearts than mine. I have been called not enough by women in my own blood. I have been told to wait by people who never told me what I was waiting for. And here you are. Here is a man who is the worst thing my cousin can imagine, and the kindest thing that has happened to me in a decade. And I do not know what to do with that. She said, I cannot be with you. She said, I am sorry. She walked away from him. He let her go. Adoma booked a flight home that same night. The flight was for the next morning. She packed in 20 minutes. She told no one. She left her hotel at 5 a.m. in the dark. The driver who picked her up was the kind of driver who did not look at her in the mirror, which she did not think about at the time and would think about for the rest of her life. She did not arrive at Incheon Airport. The car turned off the highway at a junction she had not seen on the map. By the time she understood what was happening, the doors were locked from the outside and the driver was on the phone, in Korean, to a man whose voice she did not recognize. Choi Sang-hyuk had a warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Adoma was in a small room inside it by 6 a.m. She was not hurt. She was not touched. She was sat in a metal chair under a single bulb. Choi sat across from her in a wide-cut black suit and a heavy gold ring with a red stone. He smiled the entire time he spoke to her. He told her she was a beautiful woman. He told her she had been chosen by an unusually fortunate man. He told her that her unusually fortunate man was going to make a phone call by sunset, or he was going to be making a different phone call entirely. Adoma did not cry. She had been practicing not crying since she was 22. She looked at Choi Sang-hyuk across that table and she said, quietly, in a voice he had not been expecting, you do not know what you have done. She believed it. She did not yet know how completely true it was. Across the city, in the long black room over the Han River, Park Min-joon was being told by Do Yoon-cha that the woman he had let go 14 hours earlier had been taken from the highway to Incheon. Min-joon did not say anything for a long minute. He stood up. He walked to the window. He looked at the river. He said, quietly, find me Choi Sang-hyuk. Do Yoon said, we have him. Min-joon said, get the car. The warehouse was a concrete building on the outskirts of the city, low and wide, with a corrugated steel roof and one main entrance at the far end of a long bare room. There were 9 men inside it when the door opened at 12 minutes past 3 in the afternoon. The man who came through the door did not hurry. He was wearing a charcoal 3-piece suit, a crisp white shirt with the top button open, and silver cufflinks that caught the cold overhead light when he moved his wrists. He had silver threading at his temples and a thin pale scar along the right side of his jaw. He carried nothing in his hands. He did not need to. By the time he reached the center of the room, 4 of the 9 men in it had already lowered their eyes to the floor. Choi Sang-hyuk was sitting at a long metal table at the back of the room, beneath the single low bulb, in his wide-cut black suit with the heavy gold ring on his left index finger. He was smoking. His smile, when Min-joon walked in, was the smile of a man who genuinely believed he had finally evened the score. He kept that smile on his face for 1 full minute longer than was wise for him. Min-joon walked the length of the warehouse. He stopped at the table. He pulled out the empty chair across from Choi. He sat down. A glass of water had been set down at his place. He did not touch it. He looked at Choi for a long quiet moment. Then he took the cigarette pack off the table. He took a cigarette out. He let Choi reach across with a lighter and light it for him. He smoked the cigarette slowly, the way a man smokes a cigarette in his own kitchen on a Sunday morning. The smoke curled up to the low bulb and pooled there. When the cigarette was finished, he stubbed it out on the metal surface of the table. He looked, once, over his shoulder, at Do Yoon-cha standing by the steel door. Do Yoon nodded. Min-joon turned back to Choi. He said quietly, you brought her into this room. He said, you knew the rule. He said, you knew and you brought her in anyway. Choi Sang-hyuk opened his mouth to speak. He did not finish the sentence. What happened in the next 4 minutes inside that warehouse needed no raised voice. Needed no fight. It needed only the cold mathematical certainty of 9 men understanding, in the same moment, that the wrong woman had been collected that morning, and that the cost of collecting her was not going to be paid in installments. When Park Min-joon opened the door of the small inner room where Adoma had been sitting for 9 hours under a single bulb, his suit was clean. His face was the face from the gala. His hands were the hands that had set down the glass at the side table on the night of the toast. He stopped 3 feet inside the door. He looked at her for a long second. He said only, are you all right? She stood up out of the metal chair. She walked the 3 feet between them. She put both of her hands on his face. She said, "I know what you just did." He said, "I know." She said, "I know what you are." He said, "I know." She said, "Take me home." He took her home. She did not mean London. She meant wherever he was. Kwame Sarpong, who had spent the 4 days since the gala bleeding capital and dignity at the same speed, made one final move. He called a press conference. He told the Korean business community, through a polished spokesperson, that there had been a family scandal involving a relative from London. He told them that this relative had been, regrettably, exploiting Sarpong family hospitality. He told them that the Sarpong family would be issuing a statement on the morning of the press conference to clarify the matter and protect their reputation. He believed, in the way only a drowning man can believe, that one more public humiliation of Adoma would buy him another 6 months of the empire he had built on borrowed time. The press conference was held in the ballroom of his own hotel. 200 chairs, cameras at the back, a long table at the front, Afia in champagne silk, Ya in a smaller version of the same dress, Kwame in midnight blue with the gold watch on his wrist. Adoma walked into the ballroom at 9 a.m. exactly. She was wearing a deep emerald wrap dress. Her hair was in a high full afro puff with a thin black silk scarf at the base. Her grandmother's jade and gold pendant was at her collarbone. Her hands were steady. Park Min-joon walked in beside her. He was wearing the charcoal suit, the silver cufflinks, the white shirt with the top button open. He was holding her left hand. He was not in front of her. He was beside her. He did not look at the room. The room looked at him. Afia saw them and forgot how to breathe. Ya saw them and reached for her sister's arm. Kwame saw Park Min-joon and finally, in the longest second of his life, understood that the man he had been borrowing borrowed money from had a name he should have known 3 years ago. Adoma walked to the front of the ballroom. She did not go to the long table. She took the microphone off its stand. She turned to face the room. She said, "I am Adoma Frimpong. I am 38 years old. I am a pastry chef in London. I have been single for 7 years because I once loved a man who did not want me on my own wedding day, and I refused, after that, to be loved by anyone smaller than I was." She paused. She looked at Afia. She said, "You brought me to Seoul to make me small." She said, "You were not the first." She said, "You will be the last." She put the microphone back on its stand. She walked off the stage. She took Park Min-joon's hand again. They walked out of the ballroom. By sunrise the next morning, the Sarpong Empire was no longer the Sarpong Empire. Min-joon had not raised his voice once. He had not had to. The wedding was in Ghana, in her grandmother's village, 6 months later. There was a courtyard with red earth and white walls and bougainvillea on every gate. There was a long table under a canopy of woven palm. There were Korean elders, flown in by Min-joon, who bowed to Mame Acua as she came out of her house in a deep blue and gold head wrap, and Mame Acua, who had been waiting 80 years for this, lifted Min-joon's face in both of her small lined hands and told him in a voice that did not waver that she had been waiting a long time for him. Min-joon did not blink for the entire ceremony. He had blinked through worse rooms. He could not, it turned out, blink through this one. The pastry shop opened in Seoul 3 weeks after the wedding. It was called Mame. It was on a small street near the old palace. Adoma had no idea, until the morning she walked in for the first time and saw the orange peel motif worked into the tile on the back wall, that Min-joon had been quietly building the shop for her since the morning after the gala. She did not say anything when she saw the tiles. She put both hands on her face. He stood beside her in the doorway and did not say anything either. There was a trip that winter to the coast she had described in one sentence at the tea house 7 months earlier. There was a small white house. There was a balcony over the water. There was a morning when she sat on the balcony in a soft robe and turned to him and said, "I think there are 2. The doctor confirmed it. Twin girls. Park Min-joon, who had held his face still through the worst rooms his world had ever made, broke. He cried. He apologized 3 times for crying. She held him. She did not let him apologize for the 4th. A foundation opened in her name a year later, the Adoma Frimpong Foundation. It funded a scholarship for plus-sized girls from West African families to study in any field they chose. The first cohort was 12 girls. The second cohort was 40. Mame Acua in Ghana lived to see the third. The twin girls were named after Min-joon's sister and after Adoma's grandmother. Minhee, Akua. On a Sunday morning, for years on, in a kitchen in Seoul, Minhee and Akua ran through the door in matching pajamas, chasing each other in two languages neither of them had yet decided was the main one. Adoma was at the counter rolling out dough. Minjun was at the table with a coffee, watching her work. The light from the window was the color of soft honey. He looked across the room at her. She felt him looking, the way she had felt him looking under an awning 4 years ago, and she lifted her eyes from the dough and met his. Neither of them spoke. The girls kept running. The bougainvillea on the windowsill, brought from her grandmother's house, leaned softly toward the light. That was the life. That was the love. That was the home a 38-year-old woman built with her own 2 legs, on the soil of a country she once flew into expecting only humiliation, with a man the world was afraid of and she was not. If the story moved you, tell me in the comments. Tell me what part stayed with you. Tell me about the moment under the awning. Tell me about her grandmother in the blue and gold head wrap. Tell me about the man who set the glass down. Tell me who you thought of while you were watching, the sister, the cousin, the friend, the woman you have not yet been brave enough to be. And remember this, the real kind of love, the kind that finds you on your own legs, in a country you should not have flown to, in a room you were supposed to be made small in, that love is always worth the wait. This is Afro-Korean Love Stories Vault. I will see you in the next one.